Okay, good morning, Ridgewood. We are joined today by a very special guest, and I could say this now, an award-winning teacher. The Teacher of the Year was just awarded last week to Mr. Monahan at Ridgewood High School. Mr. Monahan, how are you today?
I'm great, Dave and Chris, or Mr. Bailey and Mr. Fabish. Thank you guys so much for having me. And I think it's really awesome you guys are doing this show.
First of all, congratulations, well deserved. Mr. Monahan is an alumni. He came back to teach at the high school he attended, and he is not only a fantastic teacher and a very high-level teacher, but just a great person in the building, always coming up with ideas, technologically very savvy and helpful to all his colleagues. So he's not only teaching kids, he's teaching teachers and teaching the adults. So, we really value you at our high school. And the second thing is, by far, you have the best backdrop for these interviews that we've done. Are you in heaven there? Where are you?
The funny thing is, I probably have spent more time on this deck since we've been doing school from home than in the last 10 years combined. So I'm getting a lot of use of the deck in my backyard this year.
That's awesome. Yeah, it really does look beautiful. And I wish my deck looked that good. What to kick things off, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at RHS, what your role is at the high school?
Sure. So for about the last 11 years, I've primarily been the advanced placement micro and macroeconomics teacher, which I know it sounds really bad, but in reality, it's way worse than that. And that started about 2008 in the last financial crisis. And over the 12 years now, it's become a more popular class. A lot of people want to learn about economics, and the state of New Jersey has made it a graduation requirement that all students have to take at least one financial literacy class. So in the old days, I used to teach some psychology and history classes too, but these days I have to teach just economics to kind of fill that demand.
Talk to us a little bit about being a faculty member here and at the high school where you attended during this moment in history, which is obviously something we've never lived through. How has that felt for you as a Ridgewood teacher and a Ridgewood kid, and now helping other Ridgewood kids?
Yeah, the first thing that jumps out at me is how many of my classmates that I went to high school with that are working in healthcare or are first responders. I think I would be remiss if I didn't give them a huge thanks and a shout out for all the work they do in the front lines, trying to flatten the curve and trying to treat the people that are infected with the virus. And I'm so proud of all them. But the thing that's even closer to home for me are all the sacrifices that our students, are the parents and the families of our students, and that our colleagues have made to get through this time and still deliver a high quality instruction, even though we can't be in the building together. I really feel like Ridgewood hasn't missed a beat and has taken this completely in stride. And I feel like our students are still getting really, really valuable education. I know in my office here at home, I'm teaching advanced placement economics each day. And I'm pretty sure my students are going to find a lot of success on those 2 AP exams, and they're going to get college credit. And they haven't really missed a beat. But I'm really proud, I think most above all, of my seniors. I almost exclusively teach seniors. And they've just made this incredible sacrifice to flatten the curve. They've been staying home. They've been avoiding socializing, even though that's probably something they would like to be doing and they would otherwise be doing. And I give them a ton of credit for helping out in this crisis. I think the virus would have spread a lot further if we didn't do the things that we've done. So I want to say thank you to all my seniors for that.
True to form. You're very, the years that I've gotten to know you, very selfless individual, and in a question that we ask about you start to speak about others, and I think that speaks a lot to you and your character, and I really appreciate that. Speaking about being an alum of RHS and then coming back, what kind of got you into education, and really any people that were influential in your life as a student that, maybe you came back to work with, or, just that had an effect on your life and the course that you're on now as an educator?
That's a great question, and I can think of three people right away. The first person that comes to mind is that when I was a senior in high school, I had a U.S. history teacher named Mrs. Baker. And Mrs. Baker, for those that knew her or know her, she was a bit of a pistol, and she and I sometimes would kind of go back and forth when we were talking history in discussion during class. There was a day when she kind of snapped at me, and she just goes, "Well, Monahan, if you're so smart, why don't you teach class tomorrow?" And true to form, I went to the library that night and I prepared a lesson. As a senior in high school, I came in the next day and I got to teach her history class. She pulled me aside and said I should consider a career in education. And lo and behold, when I eventually did become a teacher, it was when Mrs. Baker was retiring that the principal of Ridgewood High School interviewed me and hired me to become a social studies teacher. So that was a really special experience for me. But the other two people that I think of are Mrs. Yanone was my chemistry teacher when I was in high school. She was known as Miss Miller back then. And I like to think a lot of the things that I do as a teacher, I learned from her when I was a student at Ridgewood High School. And as her colleague, she's been the grade advisor ever since I've been a teacher at Ridgewood High School. And the way that that she manages the difficulties of that job and the ins and outs of running an entire class of students, I've always looked up to her, and she's always been a source of inspiration to me. And the third person is somebody you guys are very well acquainted with. It's Coach Chuck Johnson. I can't tell you guys how much of a positive impact Chuck had on my life, and I'm kind of glad I get to do this video and say this. I hope he sees this. I was a little bit of I guess you'd call it a discipline problem when I was a middle school student. And when I got to Ridgewood High School, meeting Coach Jay and getting to play football and that experience of being part of a team, it really was the critical change in my life that taught me to shape up. And I'll never forget the day that Chuck Johnson pulled me aside. And I think he was trying to give me a talk about how I wasn't achieving my potential maybe as an athlete, but maybe he was talking about school too. And I'll never forget, he pulled me aside and he's like, "Monahan," he goes, "you've got a brain like a computer. You got to learn how to get that thing to work for you better." And so that was something that in football, it made a little bit of a difference to memorize plays and blitz pickups and stuff like that. But I started to apply that in the classroom in high school, and doors started to open for me. And I realized that Coach Jay had steered me in the right direction. And it was a lot of academic things that became my passions in college. And
that's great. And yeah, hopefully all three of those people get to see this video. We're going to jump right into the rapid fire round. There's a lot out there that the public wants to know about the Teacher of the Year. So first of all, how did you get that glorious mustache?
Ooh, that's a good question. This actually started.
And how do you maintain it? The world wants to know.
Two very good questions. Believe it or not, this started as just a joke. I had a pretty big beard this fall, and I was shaving back the beard, and I looked and I saw how ridiculous the mustache looked. And faculty photos were coming up about a week in advance. So I said, you know what? Let's just let this go. I figured Mr. Apple, Mr. Linaw, and Mr. Yanone in my office would get a good chuckle out of having a big mustache. And faculty photos came and went. And I said, you know what? I think I want to keep this a little bit longer. And we're going on about, 7 months now. To answer Mr. Fabish about how I maintain the hold, that's a little trickier. There's a couple different products that I have to use. But my local barber shop pointed me in the direction of a certain wax that will hold the shape. And I have to say that as we've moved to remote learning, it's kind of fun when I'm making videos for my students. It gives me motivation to make sure I take care of the mustache so that it looks decent in the videos.
Well, that mustache is going to be immortalized in YouTube history now. It's not going anywhere. All right. So first question for rapid fire round. Favorite movie?
Oh, Last of the Mohicans.
Nice choice.
Television series that you're into right now?
That I'm into right now, or of all time?
Right now and all time.
Let's see. Right now, television series. I'm really ashamed to say that I got sucked into the mindless vortex that is Tiger King over this this last month or so, and yeah, so Tiger King. But my favorite all-time show is Lost.
Excellent. So, not including Joe Exotic, who ran for president, who is your favorite president of all time?
Oh, that's such a good question. There's so many good answers to that. As far as a favorite president, that's a really, really difficult question. I'm gonna have to go with FDR, though. I'm gonna have to. It's really tough not to pick Teddy Roosevelt for the mustache and other reasons, but I think because of the era we're in right now, the way that Franklin Roosevelt unified the nation and spoke to the nation in his fireside chats, I feel a lot of that going on right now with leaders in our local communities and governors. And even, you know, what you guys are doing. I think this is a little bit like a fireside chat. So I'm going FDR.
Coolest place you've ever visited?
All right. So last summer, I went on a trip through Canada. And after spending some time in Prince Edward Island and on Nova Scotia, I went all the way up to the northernmost point of Nova Scotia called Cape Breton. And then within Cape Breton, I went to the northernmost point, which is the Highlands National Park. And that's the most amazing place I've ever spent time in my life. I did a bunch of hiking and camping up there. Basically, moose will walk up to you on the trails. Coolest place I've ever been. Everyone should Google it.
Last book that you read?
The last book that I read that I finished is called The Last Days of Night. It's about Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison and the battle to bring electricity to the United States.
And last, what are the next 10 years? What are your personal and professional goals?
Oh, that's a great one. I don't have I don't think I look too much ahead to like 10 years down the road. I try really hard to make my classroom and the class that I teach the best that it could be each year. Each summer, I think I look back at how things went and how I can improve them. So for every year that I'm teaching at Ridgewood High School, I'd say that my goal is just to keep improving as a teacher through self-reflection and professional development. But to be honest, I just did finish a master's program. And I'd like to think 10 years from now, I might be the principal of a high school or a middle school somewhere in New Jersey, to be honest.
Very cool. And then just to kind of wrap things up, if you wouldn't mind, is there any bit of advice that you have for our current students here, as we kind of move forward through this situation?
Yeah, I think a lot about that one. Mr. Pizzuto and I, from time to time, or even Mrs. Unone and I, talk about this, and just the way that life has worked out for me, I feel like I've been thrown a lot of punches that I've had to react to and respond to, and a lot of people have, but I know that I've dealt with a lot of those things. I really empathize with my students, and throughout the remainder of this year, I'm going to try to find ways to communicate more specifically with them. But I have a little bit of a motto or a mantra that I live by, and it's that it's not getting knocked down that matters. It's getting back up. And I know that this is a big setback for the entire nation. It's a huge setback for New Jersey and for the Ridgewood High School community. But for my seniors, but also for everybody else in the district and also for colleagues, we're going to eventually be able to pick ourselves back up from this and get up off the mat and get back to things. And it's probably going to be a struggle, but we're all in it together, and I think we're going to accomplish great things.
Well said, Mr. Monahan. Thank you so much. Ridgewood High School is very lucky to have you, and we hope you and your family stay safe, okay?
Absolutely. Congratulations again on being awarded Teacher of the Year. Well deserved.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr. Monahan.
Thank you, Mr.